皆さん、こんにちは。お久しぶり。私の名前はカルです。Welcome to my Lingo kingdom. I am Carl, and I am learning Nihongo, Gaelic, and Kumbraeg. So, in today's video, I wanted to react to that Japanese man, Yuta, who's trying out Duolingo. I've been wanting to watch and review this for a long time. Not only because I really like his videos and because they're so helpful to a lot of Japanese learners like me, but also because one of the main ways that I started learning Japanese in earnest was through Duolingo. So it kind of makes me wonder how many hundreds of days of streaks of, Duolingo on Japanese that I put in, how much of it is actually legit. And my commentary on his commentary is not because I know more than he does. I'm obviously still just a learner, and he's a native speaker, but just my perspective as a learner. So he's already logged in, and he's already tried out some of the kana, and of course knows all of it, because he's a native Japanese speaker. So now let's see what his reaction is to something a little more complicated.
That's probably too easy for not just me, but many of you guys. So let me just try. Of course, complete checkpoint 1 to unlock these skills. It's a bit tedious. I wish you could just skip, because you already know your level.
Namae.
Easy peasy Japanesey.
Natsu.
What did he say?
Natsu.
That doesn't sound right.
Should be
Natsu.
Natsu.
It's natsu. Questionable pitch accent.
Ohayo.
I think Duolingo wants me to say Ohayo gozaimasu, but Ohayo is also correct. That's good.
Indo.
Also, this is one of the first levels. Is this really a very important name of the city for beginners? Because even with native Japanese speakers, they might actually not be familiar with this city. I've been to Poland, but not many Japanese people have.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
I like how this person is very enthusiastic. Warszawa, definitely not beginner level vocabulary. It's a very weird choice. So this kind of one word, one definition exercise doesn't make sense because with basic words, you tend to have many different definitions, and depending on the situation, you might use them differently. So it only makes sense to learn them in context.
That is true. Context is super important, especially with Japanese. I would say context is one of the hardest things about Japanese, at least for me, because there's so many things where if you change the context but keep the words the same, the meaning would change. And I've actually got a video about the things I wish I knew before I started learning Japanese, and you can watch that right up here. And that's also why I don't recommend you learn a language, whether it's Japanese or something else, but especially Japanese. I don't recommend you learn that only on Duolingo. I still use Duolingo. I think it's helpful. I think it's great for a lot of reasons. But for learning Japanese and some other languages, because of the context is so important to understanding the meaning, I think that you have to learn through stories. And that's why I am such a huge proponent of Ollie Richards' story learning classes. I'm almost done with his level 1 of Japanese Uncovered. That's like the beginner A1, A2 type level, where you actually learn Japanese in context in a memorable and exciting way through the power of these short stories. So if you want to learn more about that and you want to check it out and become a story learning student like me, then I've got a link down in the description below. Now let's keep listening to that man Yuta.
American です.
I'm an American. Except I'm not.
It's like the, are you a robot?
To cut? Wait a minute. Kiru means to cut. To wear is kiru.
Oh, interesting. Kiru and kiru. This is another thing that I think is really hard about Japanese, is how many synonyms there are. Like the word for leg and foot. How do you say foot in Japanese? Ashi. How do you say leg? Ashi. So I asked one of my friends from Japan, one of my coworkers, was like, so what's the difference? He's like, different kanji. So it's the same with this.
These are two different words, and Duolingo is straight up wrong. This is what happens when teachers don't understand pitch accent. Dirty.
Sounds like Duolingo needs to take some pitch accent lessons from Yuta-san or from Dogen-san. You know, you need to get on their level.
Wait, what did he say?
私
He doesn't sound like a native speaker.
私
This is a weird accent. Sweden.
スウェーデン
She sounds very tired. Sweden. Sweden.
7
I guess this is a number, but this could be somebody's name. This is what happens when you just give you one word without any context.
Context.
Actually, let me try.
And I will give Duolingo credit for this, because as you go further along, there is more context, at least in the way that you have a lot more full sentences as you learn more vocabulary. They've got full sentences in the lessons. It's not as much just one word. But still, story learning, Japanese Uncovered, an entire story with, someone to explain the grammar who has learned the language as a foreigner, Ollie Richards, and then you've also got a native speaker who's also helping teach the lesson, to provide all the pronunciation and make all the recordings of the short stories and everything. It's great. I've learned so much more from that than from Duolingo.
Tips. Always check the tips. In Japanese, when you ask someone if they are hungry, the expression is お腹が空きましたか? It literally translates to something like, has your stomach been emptied? Well, Duolingo at least tries to explain something, but this is incomplete information. I think depending on the situation.
So if someone said that to me, お腹が空いてましたか? Or おましたか? お腹が空いてましたか? I would understand, but I think I've heard お腹が空いてますか more than ましたか. Of course, one's just past tense and one's not. But this is one of those times where there's so many different ways to say things, say the same thing.
The most neutral way of asking someone if they're hungry would be お腹空いてますか?
お腹空いてますか? So that's different than お腹が空いてますか?
First of all, I didn't use ga because in natural spoken Japanese, we often don't use particles like ga.
Oh, so you
If
don't
I'm
have to say
at
it.
work and if I want to ask my colleague if they're hungry, I would probably say, お腹空いてますか? With お腹空きましたか? There's a process.
お腹空きましたか? Okay. お腹が空きましたか? お腹空きましたか? So there's so many different ways to say it.
You weren't hungry before, but now you're hungry because your stomach has emptied. So, お腹空きました. If you want to say
お
you're
腹空き
hungry,
ました.
you would probably say お腹空きました, which is a polite version of お腹空いた. Because
お腹空いた. But then there's also the even less formal, 腹減った.
with yourself, you know the time when you were not hungry. But
So, just for the sake of time, I'm going to skip ahead. But I definitely encourage you to go and watch the full video of Yuta-san. And I know he's also got some really great training. He's got, like an online membership course where you can learn Japanese from him. So definitely check his stuff out if you've not already and you're a Japanese learner. He told me to skip it. How many skip to this point? See, I'm just playing along with him.
this is fine.
お腹が空きました
お腹が空きました.
お腹が空きまし
This is a very weird way of dividing a word. Mashi isn't even a complete word.
た
I agree.
お箸を2本ください
2 chopsticks, please.
That is also something that I think is real difficult in Japanese, is all the different counters. Depending on the shape something is, you have to use a different counting word to go with it. But because it's chopsticks, it's got a different counting word there.
Interesting. So if you say two chopsticks in English, does it mean two pairs of chopsticks or just one pair of chopsticks? But the translation sounds a little too simple for the original phrase.
See what he's got there in that zen. I thought that was the counter for chopsticks. Ni zen, not hon. Usually means two pairs. So ni hon means two pairs, so four. Yeah, okay, so this might be another area where Duolingo messed up because most people are not going to realize the difference there.
But the translation sounds a little too simple for the original phrase. Ohashi, ohashi. Questionable pitch accent.
全然お肌がつきません
Wait, what did he just say?
全然お肌がつきません
Did you say ohada? It should be onaka. It's a non-word. Come on. I am not hungry at all. Is this translation good? It's a bit questionable. So the nuance of the original phrase, 全然お腹がすきません is like, it's been 6 hours since I ate my lunch, but I'm not hungry at all. What's going on? It's kind of like that, but the English version is quite neutral. It just says I'm not hungry at all. So, doesn't translate the nuances.
彼はお箸を使いません
What? He doesn't sound like a native speaker.
彼はお箸を使いません
Maybe he's not? Is it really necessary to have a non-native speaker who has a non-native accent if you are learning Japanese? I don't think so. You could at least learn from a native speaker. He does.
I mean, I would assume that
use
if you're being recorded for Duolingo that you are a native speaker.
And this phrase is also pretty unnatural because if you're eating together and your friend doesn't know how to use chopsticks, I think in Japanese you would say something like, お箸使えないんだよ. Well, interesting because, okay, he sounds like a non
お箸使えないんだよ。お箸使えないんだよ。
native speaker, not just in terms of pronunciation, but also the way he phrases things. Because here's the thing. In English, you say, I speak Japanese, I don't speak Japanese. In Japanese, we say, 日本語喋れます、日本語喋れません.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't think I've heard that very often. Usually in all of the apps, not just Duolingo, you learn 日本語が話せます or 日本語が話せません and not 喋る.
Which will be, I can speak Japanese, I can't speak Japanese if you translate them directly. So in Japanese, we actually tend to use can or cannot. But in English, you tend to use just regular verbs, right? I speak Japanese, I don't speak Japanese, instead of I can't speak Japanese. By the way, this is the reason why many Japanese people say, can you speak Japanese when they're simply asking if you speak Japanese? And I wouldn't say a mistake per se, but this is one of the common and natural ways of speaking Japanese with non-native speakers. Again, if you're learning Japanese, is it really necessary to learn the unnatural way of speaking Japanese of non-native speakers? At least you could try learning natural Japanese. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm not hungry at all.
全然
全然お腹
What did you just say, ohara? That's not even correct pronunciation. It's onaka.
が好き待て寿司
It's sushi, not sushi in standard Japanese. And they're teaching standard Japanese, so
Sushi.
the pronunciation has to be standard pronunciation. これ
これはあなたのゴールですか
Classic textbooks Japanese. This is the kind of Japanese that textbooks teach you, but we are very unlikely to say in real life. Like real life native Japanese speakers probably would never say this in real life. これは
One thing that I think Duolingo doesn't do super well is they like to always use the pronoun you, like anata. Whereas most of the time that's kind of implied when you're speaking to someone in Japanese. To the point where, in some cases, if you say anata or omae wa, it can be kind of rude or too informal. But to give Duolingo credit, sometimes I've typed in the answer for something and left out the pronoun, and it still counts it correct. So it recognizes that you don't have to use it. So that's good.
あなたのボールですか? Because most of the time we don't use あなた. Well, some people do use あなた sometimes, but in a very limited situations. But we don't usually talk like this. This is very straight up textbook Japanese. And some people argue that, oh, textbooks Japanese are fine. It's for the purpose of learning grammar. But I would say, is it really necessary to learn unnatural Japanese when you can actually learn grammar with natural Japanese with no problems? I mean, if you have a choice learning grammar with natural Japanese or unnatural Japanese, I think most people would choose natural Japanese. Stereotype much? I love how this is a white guy who says, I eat sushi with a fork. You can always learn how to use chopsticks. And sushi isn't even that rare in Western countries. A lot of white people already know how to use chopsticks. The actual translation would be something like, please give me 2 glasses.
私の好物は寿司です。
We probably never said this. Who wrote these sentences? Are they actual real-life Japanese people? Well, it's possible because many Japanese teachers have no problem writing unnatural sentences like this one.
So what's wrong with that
They
sentence?
probably don't ask themselves, do we actually talk like this? Like, if you want to say this in real life, you would probably say something like, ski.
Yeah, so in a different app I learned skinano, like my favorite. It looks like he might be saying something. 好きな食べ物は寿司です。好きな。
好きな食べ物は寿司です. Something like that. Maybe they just directly translated the English sentence into Japanese, and that's why we've got this unnatural Japanese.
And that's a problem with trying to rely too much on a translation app in your language learning. I think it's very useful a lot of times if I'm trying to learn a word or I want to hear how it's pronounced, especially something that's more common like Japanese. I do use Google Translate. But that's good for singular words. If you're talking about a whole sentence or a paragraph, translation apps like that don't take the context into account very well. Just like Duolingo in this case, because it's using almost like an English syntax mindset and then replicating that with Japanese words when that might make sense to a Japanese person, but that's not how they would say it.
あなたの好物は何ですか?
好物.
This is super unnatural. Nobody would ever speak like this. Maybe it gets more natural if you go to...
So if you are a native Japanese speaker, or you know more Japanese than me, which is probably likely, then tell me if or how you would actually use the word 好物. If it's not like how he's saying it in this context, would it ever be used at all? And how?
They are more advanced level. What do you guys think? Should I try? I think I should. Checkpoint 8.
Checkpoint
This
8.
is the
Okay.
final checkpoint.
Let's see.
Let's do this.
始めよう.
大したことじゃないんです。
It's not a big deal. His ideas were nothing more than illusions.
Okay, now this one, most stuff I've seen before and I could understand, but this one, yeah, I wouldn't know how to do this one. Not that far yet.
Unrealistic
Mada.
ideas.
彼の考えは幻想に過ぎなかった。
Given that this is more like a written piece, something that you would read in a book, it sounds fine. 彼の考えは幻想に過ぎなかった. Yeah. But it's a very bad idea to learn a language like this by translating everything into English. Because you can't translate everything, and even if you think you can, the nuances are often lost. In fact, the reason I can speak English like this is because I realized this and I stopped translating English into Japanese.
真実を述べることを誓います。
Is this wrong though?
お肌ペコペコですか
Oh, interesting. お腹ペコペコですか is perfectly natural real life Japanese.
Oh, but it counts it wrong 'cause it doesn't
Duolingo
have the particle.
doesn't like it. お腹がペコペコですか again doesn't even sound very natural to me because in a real life situation you would probably say either お腹ペコペコですか or お腹はペコペコですかお腹がペコペコですか is more like a reaction to somebody who looks very hungry. But if it's a general question, are you starving? It should be either お腹はペコペコですか or お腹ペコペコですか So Duolingo is very bad at teaching real life spoken Japanese. I feel very conflicted because before I started making this video, I thought maybe I could recommend Duolingo as a supplementary app if you are already learning Japanese. But after doing this, I'm not so sure. Like,
Yeah, I can definitely see his perspective on that. I think for me, it's still a good supplement, but it's definitely, like I said, not the main way to learn Japanese. And I think after watching this, I'm going to be even more suspicious of some of the stuff that it comes up with, and I'm going to check even more frequently with the friends that I have that are native speakers. Check out Yuta-san's channel if you've not already. Check out his online resources that he's got. So mash that like button if you enjoyed this reaction and if I should make more reaction videos. Let me know in the comments if you're going to keep using Duolingo or not. And if you'd like to learn Japanese through short stories like I am, then you can get a 7-day free trial to Japanese Uncovered by clicking the link down in the description. Mata ne!